It is an honor and delight to be here today with Senator Joseph Lieberman, who is an American lawyer and politician who served as the senator from Connecticut between the years of 1989 and 2013. During his long career, he was the vice presidential nominee for Al Gore in 2000 election and sought the presidential nomination for the Democratic Party in 2004. He's a proud member of the Jewish community. It's an honor and pleasure. Thank you for taking this time, Senator.
Thanks, Rabbi. I'm glad to be with you again, and just to thank you for all the work you do, Kirov work, really, outreach work for Judaism. Kol hakavod.
Thank you so much. So to jump right in, your Jewish identity, of course, was a significant part of your political persona, and I wonder how Jewish wisdom affected the way you thought about policy decisions.
Well, my Jewish look. Let me, in a way, to set the scene, but also disclosure. I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. There was no yeshiva there. There was no day school. I happen to have had a wonderful rabbi, Rabbi Joseph Aaronkrantz of blessed memory, our congregational rabbi, great teacher. But a lot of my learning came from him, from my father, my mother, and teachers over the years that I learned from. So I never put myself forward as a learned Jew. I'm a still learning Jew all the time. So, so you ask a good question, and I thought about it. To what extent has the Jewish part of my upbringing affected my public life? I mean, in some ways, it motivated me into public service as my own way to, try to do tikkun olam, kiddush Hashem, to try to better the world through law, which plays such and the making of laws, enforcement of laws, which plays such an important part in Jewish history and culture and religion. When people used to ask me, to what extent does your religion affect how you vote in the U.S. Senate? So I would always say, I suppose by way of disclaimer, well, I don't want you to think that I call my rabbi to ask him how I should vote on something. But it is also true that anybody who's a senator or whatever they do, and they have to make a decision, it's the result of many factors in their lives. For me, my personal experience, my reading in history and biography, the impact that my parents and my rabbi, my teachers had on me. But part of it also was really my Jewish learning. And I would say that it's inside of me, and it undoubtedly affected decisions I made throughout my career, and probably made those decisions in a way, I'm tempted to say easier, because I had all this history of centuries of rabbinic discussion, learning, opining. So I would say that Jewish values really did, in some senses, implicitly or almost subconsciously affect many decisions I made.
Yeah, very inspiring. Thank you so much. One of the things I struggle with rising anti-Semitism and the whole host of needs that other vulnerable populations have is how much to dedicate my time and energy towards the Jewish community and how much towards the welfare of other communities. And I wonder how you currently think or have thought in the past about this balance of serving of the welfare of the Jewish community and of helping those from other backgrounds as well.
It's a really good question. I think I'm going to begin answering it in an unusual place. It just comes to my mind. When I was probably in 8th grade, maybe 9th, my rabbi came to me and my parents and urged them to send me to a yeshiva in New York, which he hoped would be a preface to me going to Yeshiva University and then becoming a rabbi. Of course, I was very young at the time, and my parents had no desire to let me leave the house before I had to. So, but really at that time, and increasingly as I finished high school and went to college and law school, I of course, I wanted to live by my I had learned of Jewish values. I wanted to serve Jewish causes, but I also felt a calling both from within Judaism to reach out and serve the broader world. I mean, the rabbis are very clear that the children of Israel, Bnei Yisrael, received the Ten Commandments and the Torah on Mount Sinai, but we're receiving them on behalf of all of humanity. And our mission is not a parochial one. I mean, it's really tikkun olam, is to better improve the world. It's not to better and improve the Jewish community alone. So that was the choice I made. Now there's room in a busy life, and you're a very energetic young man with the healthiest of ambitions to make a difference. So we can both find ways to make a difference within the Jewish world and in the broader world as well, which I think is our responsibility as Jews.
Beautiful. And I often think it's not a zero-sum game. By strengthening the Jewish people, we're strengthening the world. And like you said, actualizing Jewish values to serve other communities also strengthens us in our convictions. So in terms...
just forgive me, but the famous letter from Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, and Jews in the diaspora at that point in Babylonia, I guess, which is to seek the peace of the community where you live, because in its peace you will find your own peace, to a certain extent, your own freedom. And that's a very wise insight. I will just share a personal moment. When I first attained what I would call a significant public office, I was elected majority leader of the state senate in Connecticut, and I had already been to New York and been to hear the Lubavitcher Rabbi of blessed memory speak, and so my Chabad friends in the Haven said, write to the Rabbi, tell him that you become a majority leader, and he'll give you a bracha, he'll give you advice. So I did, and he sent me a letter which I cherished, in which he quoted that sentence from Jeremiah that I just paraphrased. Seek the peace and essentially the well-being of the broader community, and in that you will find your own peace and well-being.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So, I wonder, thinking about moral priorities today, I mean, there's a whole host of things you can obviously list, but what would you see as a top moral issue facing the American people today to be prioritized, and the American Jewish community? Those might be connected or they might be completely separate. But what do you think we ought to be thinking about priorities now in our moral mission?
Okay, that's a hard one to really choose one. I mean, I've been quite focused inside America on the decline of our political system and political dialogue, and the way in which the process doesn't work anymore. I mean, this is an extraordinary country founded on a premise that's quite Judaic. It's also Christian, but it's the whole idea. What was the Declaration of Independence? They said they were creating a country to secure the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which were the endowment of our Creator to every person. And then they created the government of checks and balances. It clearly required from the beginning negotiation, compromise, listen to the other side, and then do something for the good of the country. George Washington, in his famous farewell address after 2 terms as our first president, cautioned against what he already saw, which was the growing influence of what he called factions. I think today we might call them political parties, we might call them interest groups, we might call them ideological groups, but he thought that the loyalty to those factions could threaten loyalty and service to the country. and really bring the country down lower than it should be. And I think, unfortunately, we're living through Washington's nightmare at this moment. The other aspect of this, and this really runs through the narrative of Jewish values, Jewish rabbinic thought, is civility. I mean, there's fascinating sections, as you know better than I, Rabbi, and Talmud, about the way in which people should greet each other. We're told by the rabbis it's important to have a smile when you're saying hello to people. We're told that you have to listen to people. Dialogue is important. You love questions and answers. The whole story of the Talmud is a great story of the rabbi whose his learning partner dies, and his students see he's in a depression. They bring him, you know the story, somebody else, a great scholar, to study with him, learn with him, and the rabbi gets furious because he basically, the new man just agrees with him about everything. And he said, so we have lost the ability to civilly, respectfully challenge each other, then listen to each other, respect each other, and then negotiate and get something done for the country. So it's interesting what you elicit from me on that question. Of course, there are many moral issues we have to worry about, the effect of the entertainment culture on our children's values. How do we deal with immigrants? How do we continue our pursuit of humanitarian health care for everybody in the country? But if you ask me, really, to me, what do I think is the major challenge now? It's to restore civility and constructive, respectful dialogue and results, solving problems to our American political system, which is threatened right now.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point. And going back to your point about the welfare of the country and how that affects our own welfare, I think we see that that's incivility occurring within the Jewish community in some ways as well. I myself identify as modern Orthodox, but we lead this pluralistic learning center where we try to get liberal Zionists and conservative Zionists to talk, Reform Jews and Orthodox Jews to talk, and that's not always as easy as it may seem. So your point resonates for me very much.
No, it's very important what you're doing. And I'll just say this, that I heard a rabbi say once that it's true now that the various denominations of Judaism often feel that they can't pray together, but we can certainly learn together. And we can talk and discuss together. And I appreciate the extent to which your doors are open and you facilitate exactly that kind of dialogue.
Thank you. So my last question for you, you're obviously a very busy man, and I wonder how, and the truth is I've gotten snippets of your answer in this in your wonderful book on Shabbat and your wonderful book on counting the Omer, but I'd love to expose your answer to a broader audience of how you've been able to balance your public service with Jewish ritual observance, and what advice you have for others who have some trepidation of entering public service because of the inability to balance those two commitments.
Yeah, thank you. So, in the book, I sort of paraphrase the famous Israeli writer Achad Ha'am, who said it's not so much that the Jewish people keep Shabbat as Shabbat keeps the Jewish people. So I always felt that it's not so much the question of how could I be a U.S. Senator and observe Shabbat? To me, it's how could I be a U.S. Senator and not observe Shabbat? Part of it is just the idea that, as you know, in the commandment to observe Shabbat in the Torah, there's another part of it that people often miss, which is the commandment to work hard the other 6 days and then rest, and then look back on the week, feel refreshed, hopefully learn some things from what you did, and then go forward to the next week. So that understanding of Shabbat was always very, very important to me. Look, in my lifetime and yours, notwithstanding the clouds of anti-Semitism that are back in parts of the sky, even in America, there is tremendous acceptance of religious diversity. And I'll put it in a more direct and specific way. I never felt in my years, 40 years in public office, elected office, I lost count of how many times I ran in elections. I never felt that the fact that I was a religiously observant Jew had a negative effect on my career, on the most basic part of my career, which is whether people would vote for me. Please understand, I know there were some anti-Semites out there, but they're very much outnumbered by the people who are clearly open, accepting, tolerant. And in fact, I found in Connecticut, which certainly is in the early phases of my career was primarily a Roman Catholic state, that there was really quite a lot of respect for the fact that, for instance, the most visible part of my religious observance was Shabbat, that they really respected, and it was moving for me that my faith was, as they would put it, was so important to me that I wouldn't get involved in politics for 25 hours a week. And so I would say, and I hope and pray that it continues to be true, that that your generation and generation behind you rising, and hopefully this will be so forever, will not have to choose between religious observance and success in the secular world, whatever your career is, politics, government service, lawyer, doctor, business person, anything. You can make it and still be faithful.
It's an amazing message. Senator, may you be blessed with good health and long life and continue all your good deeds and inspiring and writing and teaching. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Rabbi. Same for you.
Amen.
Be well. God bless you.